Hello, everyone, and happy Halloween. Welcome to Leveraging LinkedIn for a Career Change, the last event in our Careers Outside of Higher Education month series. I'm incredibly excited at this culminating session that's going to bring together everything we've been talking about throughout this entire month. Before we get to that session, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping and some introductions. My name is Dr. Adam Sobolski. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am the CEO and founder of transform.forward. It is a boutique change management, strategy consulting, and executive coaching agency. My background is similar to many of yours. I spent 20 years in and out of higher education, both in on and off-campus roles, having served most recently as a chief of staff and assistant vice president for student engagement and success. Higher ed loves our long titles. I still remain active in the field through research and publication, as well as teaching in some graduate programs. Before we get started with today's session, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping for those who are attending. The first thing is that this session, like all of the others, will be recorded and made available on our website and our YouTube channel. So feel free to check those out if there's any nuggets that you want to come back to, or if you're only able to make part of the session. If you're interested in closed captioning, we recommend using the Google Chrome browser and enabling live captioning on your settings. If you head over to our LinkedIn page, that also has live captioning as well. Also, many people aren't familiar with the StreamYard platform. It does allow you to ask questions and provide comments throughout the experience. One thing to keep in mind is that typically comments are displayed like this on the screen. And so you'll see that your logged in name is the name that is associated with that comment. If you don't want your name associated with the comment, feel free to add it to the text and we will type out the comment or question separately. Or you can change your name to anonymous and then it isn't identifiable to you at all. So just keep that in mind as you're participating. We know that sometimes thinking about expat life is a bit of a sensitive topic, and we want to make sure that nobody is sort of outing themselves unintentionally throughout the session. So before I introduce today's speaker, I want to give a little bit of background for those who this might be your first session. While October has historically been Careers in Student Affairs Month, we've taken a lighthearted pivot as we've seen a demand for information and resources available to folks who are thinking about expat life. And so we've dubbed it Careers Outside of Student Affairs Month, not meant as any kind of slight toward the original month, but really a lighthearted pivot, like I mentioned, really helping provide those resources and connections to professionals who have done exactly what you're thinking about doing. This month was designed for you and with you. Hundreds of you commented and liked and suggested topics on social media, in various groups and listservs. That's how we've recruited some of our speakers, including our speaker for today. We've been really excited by the reception for these conversations throughout the month of October, and we're thinking about continuing these beyond as well. Today, we're really rounding out this session. All throughout the month, we've had folks talk about their decision-making process, what their journeys have looked like, examples of roles for expats. And the last 2 days, yesterday, we talked a lot about imposterness and your resume in particular. And today, it's all things LinkedIn, right? How do you manage your digital presence to make sure that you're preparing yourself, putting your best foot forward to be part of the expat community? So I'm super excited today to be joined by Annalicia. Thank you for coming today.
Great, thank you so much for having me.
So Annalicia is going to give you a workshop about leveraging LinkedIn, all things LinkedIn, and she's going to be a very hands-on experience. And so as you go through, definitely take notes and take note of all the nuggets she's going to provide. Like I said, this will be recorded, so if you need to reference back as you're doing hands-on work on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so. We will make sure that there's time at the end for question and answers. We want to make sure that Annalicia has the ability to get through all of her information that she wants to share with you folks. So Annalicia, I'm going to turn it over to you. And to start, would you mind giving folks a brief introduction of yourself?
Well, first and foremost, everyone, thank you all so much for being here. As Adam mentioned, my full name is Annalicia Hernandez Garcia. My pronouns are she, hers, and ella, and I have been in higher education for over a decade. Most of my experience of the first 10 years was primarily in residential life, and I recently transitioned earlier this year to alumni relations. And what really started my passion for career development was actually during COVID in 2020. My partner and I, we created a social media account called Hands on Higher Ed, where we were teaching and promoting and helping higher ed professionals can kind of navigate the work that they do to avoid like burnout and feeling overwhelmed. But however, through that effort and through the efforts of many individuals and their experiences, there was a huge transition of not knowing just how to necessarily just manage the work, but how to potentially leave the work and change careers. And so that is when during the last 3 years or so, I've been doing one-on-one coaching, also known as skill set space, where I'm teaching individuals how to pivot outside of higher ed, or perhaps how to pivot from like one industry to another within higher education. And I'm really happy to go over with you all LinkedIn, which is an extremely powerful tool, and how to leverage and navigate if you all are currently wanting a career change or a transition. Great. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is that I am going to go ahead and kind of provide you all with an overview of my LinkedIn profile. And how this is going to be mapped out is I am literally going to talk from all the things that you need within your LinkedIn profile, starting from the very top and working our way down to the bottom. In addition of sharing with y'all all the different things to be mindful of LinkedIn, I'm also going to share with y'all a couple of free resources that you all should definitely utilize. And then also at the end of the session, I'll make sure that you all are aware of how to connect with me, just in case if you all have any additional questions or if you need one-on-one support and so on and so forth. So with that, when it comes to LinkedIn, something for you all to know, especially for those that are currently working in higher education, is that for most public universities and somewhat private, depending on your institution, most of y'all should have access to LinkedIn, either LinkedIn Learning or even LinkedIn Premium for free. So that's the first thing that I always encourage folks to do, is check in with the university to see if you have access to that. And in the event, if your university or community college or whatnot does not offer that, the second best place to get either LinkedIn Premium at most places, or at least LinkedIn Learning for free, is at your public library. And most that is a requirement is just signing up to receive a library card. And once you go in, you can let them know that you're wanting to access LinkedIn and all the different free resources that they offer to the public, and you can get access to that. Luckily, within my current employment, I actually do have access to a LinkedIn Premium, but before my current employment, that's how I utilized it, was either through the university or through the public library. Um, from there, what I always go ahead and I encourage folks to do is, when you're getting started on LinkedIn, on the very top corner where it says kind of the hyperlinked or the website domain, you want to make sure that it's not just a bunch of numbers and letters, but you want to customize it. And I always encourage folks, when they're customizing it, to potentially have their first name, middle initial, and last name. And you want to make it really specific and towards your profile. And the reason for this is that, one, it showcases that knowledge of that, yes, you're up to date when it comes to LinkedIn, but also two, when updating your resume, you want to make sure that you also include this onto your resume page, and you have it hyperlinked so that when they click on it, it will automatically go to your page. So in order to customize your own personalized website domain, here on the right side where it says public profile and URL, and where it says on my side, www.linkedin.com/in/Annalicia H. Garcia, that is where you're going to go ahead and click the edit. And this is how you could potentially view it, edit it, so on and so forth, when seeing those different things. So that's just something really important to do. And let's say if you're like, oh, I still don't know how to do it, you all can simply Google how to change my URL username on LinkedIn, and it will visually show you step by step if you need that. But if not, if you clicked in, you would be able to access it via the public profile and URL. Something to note as well that's really, really important. We'll talk about the settings in a bit, but when it comes to LinkedIn, um something that you all need to absolutely do is here on the banner that's behind my profile photo, you're going to want to make sure that you're not just using the generic LinkedIn background photo stock that they have on those various colors, or you don't want to just have it where it's a pretty picture of a background or whatnot. That you actually want to create something that really lets the audience know who you are, what you're about, why they should follow you, why should recruiters look into you. And this is just additional space to showcase yourself. So that's the first thing that I always recommend, folks, is within your banner, do not just have a photo, but you should really make it about you. And so for me, for example, like I wrote, I'm on a mission to inspire, empower, and amplify the voices and stories of first generation professionals who's living their professional dreams, creating an impact in communities, and opening doors for the next generation. And so when individuals see that, whether if it's on their cellular device, on the app, or on the web page, that is the first thing they're going to notice, is that they always see the banner and your profile photo. And from there, I always encourage folks to either write your full name. And if you have a public social media or personal branding, which I know that's a different conversation for a different section, I'll also include that as well. And when creating these banners, you can always Google like what is LinkedIn banner sizes and whatnot. But I'm a huge fan of Canva. And for those of you that have access to Canva, I know at a lot of different higher education institutions, sometimes you can even get Canva for free within your current workplace. And if not, you could potentially also check in with your public library. I know not all public libraries have access to the free Canva just yet. Hopefully one day they do, especially for educators, but that's another avenue to go about if you want the Canva premium and benefits. But if not, you can always just sign up for the free basic Canva, and that's how I make all my headers and how I help other individuals make their headers. But when thinking of your header, you really want to think about like who you are, what do you want to represent, like what's the purpose, and kind of thinking of those things. And let's say if you all are ever needing support or help in like brainstorming this section, definitely reach out, let me know. In addition, next on the left side, I have my profile photo. And what I always encourage individuals when having a profile photo, you always want to have one, because in the event, if you don't have one, a lot of times recruiters or outside individuals will think you're a bot because most bots don't actually have photos. So that's something I would encourage everyone to do, but also to not necessarily have like the traditional selfie where like the photos like zoomed up on your face or whatnot, but to either have like a professional photo taken. Some universities I know does it for free for students and at their career center. And you could even ask like, hey, by any chance, would you be willing to do this for a staff? So that way I can update my LinkedIn so that I can also connect with faculty and staff and students as well. That's initially how I got my profile photo updated, is that at my previous institution, I just asked my career center and they did it for me. And then with Canva, what I went ahead and did is that I removed the background color and I added a solid color. And I know for some folks, there's always mixed messaging, like should you have a solid color or should you have like a background? For me, I'm more of a fan of a solid color because it stands out, and especially to recruiters. Then let's say if I were to have buildings or flowers or whatnot, it can come up very confusing, especially on a cellular device. So that's just a recommendation that I have. The next thing to kind of then note is right here where it comes to your name. I always encourage folks to include your full name and also to include your full name in your resume. So for example, my maiden name is Annalicia Hernandez. So earlier on in my career, a lot of folks within higher ed knows me as a Hernandez, but I didn't recently get married, but it was about 8 years ago. But my last name now is Garcia. So I just have my full name listed on my profile photo. And I would stick away with not like with using nicknames and whatnot, because you want to use the same name that you're listing out there within your resumes and your materials that you're publishing, whether if it's articles or, your places that you're working at, so on and so forth. And then there's there's an option to also add your pronouns as well. And so here I have listed my pronouns as she, her, which is optional, and it's not necessarily mandatory to have that on your LinkedIn. But I definitely feel it's very helpful. The next thing that folks tend to also get confused is this headliner. On every LinkedIn, you have about a certain amount of characters. And a lot of times I see on individuals' profile is that they will list like higher ed practitioner or higher ed professional or student affairs, professional, or, they list keywords in industry. Like, so for example, if I were to go into talent acquisition, sometimes I see folks write like talent acquisition or recruiter in hopes, or they've been told that if they use those keywords, they're going to be searchable. And that's actually quite the opposite. Is that when it comes to your headline, you don't necessarily just want to use keywords of that industry unless if it's something that's really significant. Like, so for example, let's say if I was like a LinkedIn top voice, that's something that I would potentially want to put in as a header. Or let's say if there's like an accomplishment or award-winning recognition that you received, you could potentially add that into the headliner. But I would encourage most folks to get rid of those words that you think is going to stand out, and rather make it inspirational and let folks know why they should follow you. So for example, mine is stop valuing your doubt more than your potential. So that's the inspiring piece of hook to get folks in. And then the second half of mine is inspiring others to stop settling and start soaring by providing tools to enhance their skill sets to achieve career growth and professional goals. So that is letting my audience know that whoever wants to follow me on LinkedIn, this is what I'm about. I'm about inspiring others. I'm about providing tools and resources, especially if they're free. And that's the route that I would encourage individuals to go, is make it a headline about you and showcasing who you are and what skills you bring, and stay away from the generic words. The next thing that I would go ahead and encourage folks as well is that when it comes to LinkedIn, and this is not premium, this is just free, the basic LinkedIn, is that you have an option to do a creator LinkedIn or a regular LinkedIn. And what I always encourage folks, especially if you're actively searching, is to do the creative mode. Because on the creative mode, you can actually use, I believe, anywhere between 5 hashtags and let your audience and recruiters know like what you talk about. So for example, if folks wanted to follow me on LinkedIn, they know that these are the type of content that I typically will post about. It's either career advice, career growth, job search tips, career development, and leadership development. Or let's say if you're wanting to pivot into a different industry, like program, management or learning and development, those are things that you're probably going to want to end up posting about, so that you can start making that transition and know, like, when recruiters are hopping in, they're like, oh, this person is talking about learning and development, or they are talking about training. Let me go ahead and look further and check that out. And so this is another resource that not a lot of folks will utilize, is posting content, which we will talk about in a moment. But this is something that if you are on the creator edge on LinkedIn, that I would strongly encourage you all having this. And then also you can list down your location. I specifically have my specific location where I'm currently at. However, though, sometimes when it comes to job searching, let's say if I was interested in finding a job, let's say in New York, if I list that, Redlands, California, if recruiters are looking at my page, they might be like, oh, like she's trying to apply for a job in New York, but she's in Redlands. That's going to take some time. So you might not necessarily want to list your location, especially if you're open to moving to other states or out of the country, because sometimes some folks may see like, oh, if you live in a specific location, I'd rather have someone that's closer. But there are mixed messages when it comes to location, but I think at the end, it's just about personal preference, which for me, I like having my location. From there on the LinkedIn, or you also have the option of how folks can connect with you. So on my LinkedIn profile, I actually have a hyperlink that says, let's connect. And if folks connect on it, it leads them to my link tree. And for example, like for today's workshop, folks were able to sign up via my link tree. Or let's say if they are interested in receiving like one-on-one coaching, they can go ahead and fill out a Google form, and I communicate that way. Or let's say if there are other individuals that are content creators and they ever want to collaborate or whatnot, they're able to click that and to kind of find out more information that way. So I always encourage having something of that sense, especially if you're wanting to do personal branding, or let's say if you've created your own website or you have your own website in addition to the LinkedIn, definitely showcase it and have it hyperlinked so that it allows individuals know like, okay, there's other aspects to you. Or you could even highlight some of your personal projects. Like I know I worked with someone that had it on their Google Drive, like all examples of their portfolio, and it was linked that way as well. And then when it comes to connections and followers, you can have that as well. And then for providing resources, so on my end, I am someone that I do provide resources, whether if it's like career development coaching, interview prepping, and so on and so forth. And so if folks were to click on the providing services tab, shaded in the gray area, that's when they can learn more about my services and even see reviews of the work that I've done. And so that's something to even think about as well. Is let's say for a lot of you, if you're currently helping students with their resume writing or with the presentation or navigating life after college, you can even highlight that as resources and ask them if they can serve as references for you for your career services, if that's something that you're ever wanting to explore, or doing consulting on the side and whatnot. So here, as you see on the resources right here, I have the creator mode on, and I absolutely prefer this. I love it. It's absolutely free. If you're going to do LinkedIn, I would recommend having the creator mode on. So then that way you're more aware of your analytics. You're able to have the talks about hashtags, and sometimes you're able to see who's viewing your profile a little bit more if you don't have LinkedIn Premium. There's just a lot more benefits when it comes to creator mode, which is free. And then on the resources, it talks about a little bit about your network and really how to update your profile. From there, on the activities. So on every single LinkedIn, there's this activity page or tab. And this is where individuals can view the content that you're posting, what you're commenting on, what images you're sharing, if you've written any articles, which I have a couple posted up there. And so something to note, that if you are job searching and if you're wanting to change and do a career pivot or even change like, potential like industries, you should be posting about that industry or topic. I always try to encourage folks to do it at least once a day, but I know for some that might be a lot. But I'll go ahead and show you some examples of some posts. Let me go ahead and open my post tabs. So right now, or a lot of my recent posts are showcasing the work that I'm currently doing at my office. That's all surrounded around career development and whatnot. But let me go ahead and slide through just in case to just show some more results. Is that when sharing content, you can go ahead and there's all sorts of different variations that you can even share, like an inspirational quote. You can look on Twitter, for example, and find like a viral tweet within your industry and repost it and add your comments. You can reshare someone's post from LinkedIn, but I always encourage folks, if you're going to reshare a post, you should always add in your own thoughts as well to that post. You could even share articles. So for example, there was this article about remote work statistics and trends. So I posted the article and I kind of shared some of my thoughts of what I thought about it. I shared some tips, some tweets, and so on and so forth. And so that's something to note too. If let's say if you're just like, man, like I really want to post more content and I don't know where to start, or I don't necessarily know if I have the time. Something that I always encourage folks to do is that when it comes to posts and how I typically manage it, let me go ahead and click on the button where it says create a post right here. When you click on the button, this is where you could, do whatever post you would like to do. Like I mentioned, whether if you're sharing an inspirational quote or if you're sharing tips about the industry that you're trying to go in, or an article or a repost or whatnot, you can always add images. But then there's this amazing button that says schedule for later. And what I like to do is typically once a month on a Sunday for about an hour or two, I will create content for the next following month in advance. And you could even post the date and time, and it will schedule everything for you. And it makes it that much easier. And so that's just something that I feel like a lot of folks aren't doing when they are navigating and wanting to pivot, is that they focus so much on, applying for jobs and submitting their resumes and trying to contribute, when in reality, the number one way to get discovered on LinkedIn is actually through your posting, on what you're posting about. And especially if you're trying to go into an industry, like I mentioned earlier, let's say if it's like learning and development, and you're not talking about learning and development on your page, I like, as a recruiter, I'd rather find someone that is actively talking about it, is engaging with others about learning and development, and posting about it. So that's just something that's really critical. And if there are any of you out there, you're like, oh, I don't know how to do posting, or what I should talk about, or I need a basic formula on how to, definitely feel free to reach out. It is a service that I do provide. And even at times, like, I'm also willing to help with content creation and whatnot. But this is probably something that I feel like folks don't do more of, is that they will focus more, like I mentioned earlier, on applying for jobs rather than the content that they're creating. Because I'll be quite honest, when it comes to the recruiters reaching out to me, it's not because I'm applying for jobs in their at their current company or the third party. It's because they found me through a post that I posted. And sometimes, like, you'll even have a post that may even go viral. Like, I remember a couple months ago when I was getting new into LinkedIn, or not new, a couple months, but last year, there was a point where I only had maybe like 200 followers, and all it took was one post and generated me over 1,000 followers overnight. So that's just something that's really important and crucial, that if you are, job searching, you have to be mindful of this area of posting. And if you can't post once a day, at least I would then say, like, try to aim for 3 times a week. At least as a starting point. And then for the next section, when it comes to the About Me section here on LinkedIn, a lot of times for individuals, I see where it's just a repeat or a copy and paste of what's either listed in their resume or what's already listed on their cover letter. When in reality, your LinkedIn profile should not be a copy and paste of your resume or cover letter materials, but it should be, but it should showcase of just who you are as an individual, and what skill sets you can bring to any organization or to anyone that's potentially wanting to connect with you. So, for example, when it comes to my About Me, I talked a little bit about my upbringing and identifying as a first generation individual, and some of the skill sets that I bring, like hard work and self sufficiency, so on and so forth, and like why I'm in higher education, and like my commitment to education, or why I think it's extremely important. And then I also mentioned about like how breaking into an industry can be tough, but then that's why I'm here to serve as a resource for individuals. And then at the end, I kind of mentioned kind of my call of action, like if you're a recruiter, a client, or just someone who wants to make a difference, like let's connect. And so that's something that's really important, is that here it's kind of a little bit about, who you are, what you're about, and how you can help either organizations or individuals if you're trying to generate more followers to your page. The next thing that I wanted to go ahead and highlight is a little bit about experience. So as I mentioned earlier, what I see in the experience section for a lot of individuals is they literally just copy and paste what's on their resume. And you should not do that. Like, when you have your whole LinkedIn profile, this is another avenue for either recruiters or potential employers to be able to see kind of your work in action. So this is an example right now, I don't necessarily have bullet points because I wanted to show you all two different avenues to go about this. So for example, the first thing that I would encourage folks to do is, let's say if you don't want to focus a lot on bullet points, you don't have to. A lot of times I see individuals where they get so worked up on like, oh, I got to create this bullet point or I got to do that bullet point. And rather, I encourage folks is to highlight your projects, because as higher education professionals, like we do a lot, from training to onboarding to presentations to assessments to different projects. And you should really be highlighting those. So for example, instead of me saying like, a project that I worked on was this initiative called the Women's Leadership Conference. So instead of just like saying, "Oh, I hosted a women's leadership conference that generated X amount of attendees," I'm going to show them what I did. So, for example, I listed this project, and here on this side where it says Women's Leadership Conference, I wrote a descriptor of co-led with my direct supervisor the 7th annual Women's Leadership Conference. This transformative event united 70 plus students, faculty, staff, and alumni and community members, empowering women and fostering knowledge, sharing, networking, and growth. And attendees actively participated in inspiring workshops, impactful keynotes, and engaging discussions, and so on and so forth. So I talk about what this project was, and right here I actually attached the brochure that my supervisor and I created, which talks all about the event. It talks about the breakout sessions, who the speakers were, which I was also a speaker at this event too. So I highlighted that as well. And so by doing this, provides them with an example and an insight of like, this is something that I've done. And I think that's something that a lot of folks don't do enough of, is showcasing their work. And then another aspect was this initiative called the Senior Send Off through my university. And I explained what it was and what I did, which I was responsible for organizing all the volunteers for this event that had over 2,000 plus individuals. And what's great is that I added this photo, but if people click on the view button, let me see if it will work. They see a YouTube video that the university created that showcased what this event looked like. And so it's not a video that I ended up making or anything of that, but it's something the university produced, but it's something that I helped with in generating all those volunteers navigating that. So that's just something that I would encourage folks to do, that if you're not doing it on your LinkedIn and you're worried about bullet points, forget the bullet points, and you can highlight those on your resume. Highlight projects instead. Because it visually shows potential employers and recruiters. And you also want to stand out, because everyone on LinkedIn, they're doing the bullet points, but not enough people are showcasing their projects and works. So that's one avenue to kind of highlight your current position. Another aspect that I wanted to go ahead and show, which I know a lot of folks is kind of the bullet point method. But if you do the bullet point method in highlighting your work, don't summarize basically what your position is. You want to focus on numbers and percentages, especially if you're wanting to pivot outside of higher ed, because when a company or corporation looks at you, they want to see, okay, what changes are you going to bring to their organization? And in order for them to determine that if you're the right hire, they have to see what changes you've effectively made in the current company or organization that you're working at. So this is something that's absolutely huge. So for example, as an area coordinator at my previous institution, for those of you that have experience working in residential life, I know a lot of residential life folks, they assist with crisis management, after hour calls rotation, potentially supervising student staff, maybe programming. And that's kind of what everyone else is writing on their resumes. But if I'm wanting to pivot, I need to showcase specific projects that without me there, they wouldn't have achieved. So for example, I talked a lot about the onboarding process because I was responsible for our student leader training in residential life. So I mentioned about like how many individuals I oversaw that training for. And with every training, I know most of us tend to do assessment of satisfaction. I also highlight, those different percentages. And so it's something that's really important, that if you are doing the bullet points, you got to be about numbers. if you're wanting to transition out, numbers are important. And instead of focusing on every single aspect that I did within my job, because as we know in higher education, you wear multiple hats, I focused on specific ones. Like, for example, let's say if I were to ever transition outside of higher ed, what an area that I may want to go into is talent acquisition, just because of the experience that I have. And if so, I'm only highlighting talent acquisition specific. So a lot of it focused on like training and onboarding and individual development plans and whatnot. And then also when it comes to the skills, we'll talk a little more about the skills in a moment of like what skills you should pick. But if you were to look at my LinkedIn page, that's all you're going to see is specific languages. And we'll talk a little more about wording, like especially if you're wanting to change industries, like what wording you should use specifically in that industry. But we'll talk about that in a moment. When it comes to your education in this section, it's going to be very important that you make sure that you connect, whether if you have like certificates or if you have a degree, to list it, but then also too for activities, list everything that you were a part of. Like, so for example, my undergrad, probably like many of you all on this session, was heavily involved. So I listed everything that I was in. And then also be aware of listing acronyms, and write out the full name. And then if it has an acronym associated, just put that into parentheses. And then I listed some of the skills that I had. And then in addition to my graduate degree, I listed the things that I was a part of or that I did. And when listing these activities and societies, of course, we know these are all the things that you did for free. So list it down in this area. From there, when it comes to licenses and certificates, we'll talk a little bit about LinkedIn Learning. But like I mentioned previously, if you all have access to LinkedIn Learning through your universities, you all should utilize it now while you have access for free. If not, go to your public library, get LinkedIn Learning for free. But when you are wanting to transition into a different industry, you have to make a list of what licenses and certifications are top within that industry for LinkedIn. So for example, for talent acquisition, like I mentioned earlier, I went ahead and I did a search of like, what are the top licenses and certificates through LinkedIn Learning that recruiters are looking for? And these were the ones that they were looking for at the time: was diverse talent in recruiting and hiring, diversity recruiting, uncovering unconscious biasness. And all you do is you participate through the LinkedIn Learning platform. You watch a ton of videos potentially, and then you take quizzes. And at the end, it provides you with a certificate. But the reason why it's so important to do licenses and certificates through LinkedIn Learning is because recruiters, they have the ability to map out their preferences. And a lot of them are going to list licenses and certificates of ones that they're expecting, because these are things, for example, when it comes to diverse talent and recruiting and hiring, that a company doesn't necessarily need to train me on because I went through this LinkedIn course. And sometimes folks have this mindset of, oh, if I want to transition to a different field, I have to get another certificate through a university, or I have to get a different degree. And not necessarily. You can go through LinkedIn Learning for free, or even a lot of different free certificates that are mapped out. And if you're wondering like what's licenses and certificates you should take if a Google search doesn't work for you all, you can always go into LinkedIn and type in the industry that you're wanting, but also associate, for example, like if I were to do learning and development, I would search in the search bar learning and development, LinkedIn top voices, and it will show you the top voices in that industry. Look at their profile and see what certificates they have. But then also too, in addition, make sure that you're highlighting your certificates that you've done at career conferences or at the universities that you've done as well. Make sure you're highlighting that and you're listing those as well. But like I mentioned, these are all free through LinkedIn Learning to do. The other thing that a lot of folks don't necessarily highlight is projects. And I know as hired professionals, we do a ton of presentations, or things that we may do on the side, or projects that we do outside of our work. And so this is something that I've done for a while, is that for the projects, anytime that I get asked to speak, whether if it's to like different offices or student organizations, I always attach the presentation and I talk a little bit about what I've done. So for example, earlier this year, I was asked to speak about personal branding to first generation and a first generation student summit. And I attached my presentation so folks know exactly what I talked about and what I did. And then here, oh, sorry, it's refreshing. Let me go back to the projects. My apologies. And here they're able to kind of see what the project was about. And so I have that for everything from all the sessions that I've done, the projects that I don't care if folks know, I don't care if folks, try to steal my work or, whatnot, because for me, I'd rather showcase my work that someone will see and recognize and be like, wow, like I really like their sessions that they're doing and hosting. I think it's much more marketable. So I showcase it all. And then from there, when it comes to skills, something that's extremely important to note is that when it comes to the skills, specifically if you're wanting to pivot, you have to be aware of the skills that the recruiters are currently looking for. So, for example, on your LinkedIn profile, I believe each profile can have up to, I think, 50 skills max. And based off of the skills you list, that's kind of how recruiters find and identify individuals, is that they, let's say if they're searching for like 10 different skills, they're going to mark that on their end, and then they're going to go ahead and do a search. And you want to make sure you have the correct skills that are showcasing. And if you're like, I have no idea what skills I should be highlighting, don't worry, because I'm going to show you all a free resource soon. But you also want to make sure that you actually have experience in those skills, because something that I actually did is once I listed all the skills that I had, I actually reached out to my LinkedIn community of either colleagues that I worked with or student leaders I used to supervise. And I asked if they would mark the skills that they felt like I did really well by endorsing me in those specific skills. And then also, I know the work that we do, most of us use Access, Excel, Outlook, all sorts of different technology. And the mistake that a lot of folks do is that they will say, oh, I have experience with Excel, and they just write Excel, when in reality, you all should be taking the assessment test so that you can get as a specific badge. Because let's say if you're wanting to pivot into project management, for example, and let's say you're like, oh yeah, I have experience with Excel, but if you haven't passed the LinkedIn skill assessment in Microsoft Excel, you're not going to show up on that recruiter's end. So that's just extremely important, that there's all sorts of skills assessments that you should take and pass it so that those badges can appear. Because when you have those skill assessment badges, when it comes to the recruiter's viewpoint, you're going to stand out so much more as a candidate and as an individual. And if you need to see examples, like you can literally go on my LinkedIn page and see the different badges that I have that are really universal, whether if it were to be project management or learning development or talent acquisition. I focused more on badges that can be transferable so that I can appear on those searches. And then when it comes to recommendations, this is another aspect that is huge, that if you're currently working with colleagues, or if you have formal colleagues or formal students, I know a lot of times, like especially as supervisors, there may be like evaluations that we typically fill out, but something that I always encourage folks to do is, if you're ever giving someone like an evaluation, also post something on their LinkedIn profile. And these are just recommendations that I have from either formal student leaders, supervisors, colleagues that have written about me. But however, I didn't necessarily post all of them. Like I picked maybe like my top like 10 that I had. And so that's something that I would encourage y'all, that if you don't have recommendations, you should, especially if you're like a finalist. Trust me, folks will look at your LinkedIn and they want to know what people are saying about you. And then also to be sure to also return the favor and give recommendations as well to folks. And then at the very bottom, there's different courses for those that do have our bachelor's or our master's or even doctorate. You don't necessarily have to list every single course, but there's so many different courses that I know that's transferable to a lot of different industries. So for example, like like assessment and program evaluation, I highlighted that. For digital communication, ethical aspects, and I chose courses that were really transferable to really a lot of different industries. And this is another aspect that folks don't highlight and they don't mention, which is just another thing that I encourage folks to do. And then when it comes here at the bottom for interests, you want to make sure that you have like you're following folks that are maybe top leaders within the industry that you're wanting to work in, maybe companies that you've worked at or companies you're wanting to follow, groups or newsletters. And so these are just things that I always encourage folks is to have follow or to do follows in these areas, especially in the industry that you're wanting to go into, so it appears within your LinkedIn search. So as I mentioned, when it comes to now, I'm going to go ahead and go on the very top of my screen. I'm going to go ahead and showcase LinkedIn Learning. And as I mentioned before, you're able to get LinkedIn Learning for free if your university or college offers it. And if not, go to the public library, sign up. You should get access there. But let's say if you're wanting to go into I'll just say let me do learning and development just in case. So if you go on to learning and development and type, it will give you all the top courses that are within that industry that folks have taken or would recommend you to take. So as I mentioned, if you were to follow like learning and development, the top voices of LinkedIn, see what certifications they have so that you can make sure to take those as well. Another aspect that or a resource I wanted to go ahead and share with you all, and I will also put this in the comment section, is this is absolutely free resource. If you're just like, how do I know if my LinkedIn profile is effective? How do I know if my resume is effective? By using resumeworded.com, you can literally upload your LinkedIn profile. And so for example, here on my screen where it says for my LinkedIn profile, I have a score of 89 to 100. And the whole point of this is that if you want to get the recruiter's attention, you have to be at a 90. If you're not at a 90, you're not getting noticed by recruiters, employers, whatnot. And so once you upload your LinkedIn profile, they'll provide recommendations and revisions on what to do so that you can get that higher score. But right now, the reason why I have 89 is because in my UCR section, I just had projects and I didn't list a paragraph, but after this, I'll change it. And then also you could even upload your resume. So for example, I was helping someone the other day and they're like, I'm not getting any hits by any job prospects. I'm submitting applications everywhere, but I'm not getting noticed. You can literally upload your resume and type in the different industry you're trying to get into, and it will give you a score. So for example, the person that I was helping, their resume was only scoring 49 out of 100. And you want to be at an 85. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a free resource. Some folks will pay for the premium. I don't. I like free, but this can give you a better idea of where you're at if you feel like you've just been searching and you're not necessarily getting any calls or any notices back. And then another resource I wanted to go ahead and share with y'all, especially when it comes to verbiage, because I get that a lot. Like, what language do I use, or what verbs or skills do I say? Let's say if you're wanting to go into let's say if you're wanting to transition and you want to be a recruiter, here on the top right side, there's a search that says occupation keyword search. You type in the industry, and let's see if I can zoom in. My apologies. Type in the industry you're wanting to go into. Once you do that, let's say you can click on anything that matches, but just for right now, I'll just say human resources managers as an example. Let's say I want to work into human resources. Here, it will tell you all the different tasks that they're responsible for, all the different technology skills they have, all the different work activities that they do. And so this is an idea of like when it comes to detailed work, like staffing organizational units, you need to be talking in their language and using that verbiage. And then also too, when it comes to work requirements like management and personal resources, knowledge, education, abilities, interests. So this is how you're going to translate verbiage from, like, let's say higher ed lingo to industry specific is through this amazing resource. And so that's something I wanted to go ahead and share with you all. In addition, I wanted to go ahead and kind of end it with, I know this was a lot of information and an overview, but let's say if you are ever wanting one-on-one support or whatnot, right now I do have my coaching services available. So if you were to go onto my LinkedIn page, and if you were to click here on the Let's Connect, I do have a career coaching services interest form. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that, okay, yes, we would move forward and do a potential coaching, but it's almost like filling this out and seeing like, hey, I want to have a conversation. I want to see what type of guidance and whatnot. And I'm more than willing to connect. But this is how we could potentially work together if it's something that interests you in the future. And so now I am ready to open up for some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We actually have a question that came in from LinkedIn.
Oh,
What are
perfect.
your feelings about the purple open to work banner that's available on LinkedIn?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. What are your feelings about the purple open to work banner that's available on LinkedIn?
Okay, so when it comes to the open to work banner, I've seen it be effective if you have a really intriguing post to go along with it. So let me see if I can pull up an example of what I mean by that. Hang on. Okay. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. If let's say if you're like, man, should I have the open to work banner? Should I not? Let me go ahead and share my window. So I actually recently helped out my niece with her job search, who was a recent graduate. And I actually encouraged her to have the banner up. But in addition to having the banner, you should have a post that lets folks know who you are, what you do, and why they should choose you. So, for example, we broke it down to what her purpose was, her education and experience, her being a recent graduate, why folks should choose her, and a little bit about her job seeker and ways to connect. And this blew up on her page, and folks knew that she was searching and she was really successful with her search. But let's say if you just have the open to work and you don't have anything associated with it, then you shouldn't have it. But I think when it comes to the open to work, if you're constantly posting and you're letting the world know like what you're about and what you're searching, it definitely stands out. But I also know some folks' reservations, especially with job searching, because they don't want maybe their current employers or colleagues to know that they're open to work. So if that would be the case, then I would kind of discourage that. But you could let recruiters know privately that you are open to work and not let it be public.
Awesome. And folks, just wanted a reminder, which was the resource that you said would be helpful in translating the industry experience or the experience in higher ed to industry norms?
Oh, yes, it is the 12onnet.org. I'm going to go ahead and post it in the comment. So this is a really great resource, like I mentioned earlier, the oneonline.org, that you can literally type in the position that you're looking for in the industry, and it will highlight the skills, the language, the verbiage that should be utilized within your resume and your LinkedIn profile.
Awesome. So another question is, as people are thinking about transitioning, sometimes it can be challenging because they don't necessarily want to alert their current workplace that they are looking to pivot or looking for something new. How do you recommend somebody reimagine or reinvigorate their LinkedIn profile if they're sensitive to their current campus climate and their current employment?
Yeah, so when it comes to your LinkedIn profile, whatnot, there are different settings that you can have, and have certain aspects where it would be viewable or not viewable, and that would kind of depend on like your preferences. But however, though, when it comes to updating, your LinkedIn and whatnot, I think it's also important to see, like, do you want it to have it like publicized so everyone can follow you? Are you being mindful of who's following you on LinkedIn? And whatnot. But however, at the end of the day, if you're wanting to potentially pivot, the one recommendation that I always encourage folks to do when they are searching is that a lot of times there's this misconception of like, oh, you have to have your current supervisor be a reference. And that's not necessarily the case, because literally like the last four employment opportunities that I had went through, I actually didn't use my current supervisor at the time. I ended up using my current colleagues, or individuals that have worked with me, because a lot of times I found that my current colleagues had a stronger sense of my everyday work ethic than maybe my supervisor. But it really is a personal preference, depending on the working relationship that you have. There's times where I do, there's times that I don't, depending on the climate and whatnot. But let's say if you are in a specific situation, because I know right now I'm just talking like generically, but let's say if you do ever want to chat like one-on-one briefly about like your unique situation and seeing like what the best course of action would be to navigate that, I'm more than happy to connect if needed.
So thank you.
Mhm.
And then the last question that's come in so far is, what recommendations do you have for individuals who want to build their LinkedIn network but aren't sure how to do outreach on LinkedIn to do that?
Yeah, so when it comes to recommendations on how to network with folks, and you're not sure how to do outreach, one of the first things that I always encourage folks to do is to follow the top voices of LinkedIn within the industry that they're wanting to get into. So, for example, you could always do a Google search of like project management top LinkedIn voices, and you can follow like the top 10 individuals from that industry. And from there, a lot of times what I'll do is that I'll turn on the notifications on for their profile. So anytime they post, I'm able to see what they're posting. And then I interact with folks in the comments. And so let's say if there's someone that had a really great comment or something that was just very like eye-opening, I may even send them like a specific message on LinkedIn, like, hey, I saw your message on this post. I thought it was absolutely amazing. Like, I'd love to follow you and to connect with you more. But I will say when it comes to outreach and whatnot, it is a lot easier if you post consistently. Because I'll be honest, when I first got into LinkedIn, I was doing a lot of the following and a lot of the outreach. And then eventually, when I started posting much more on my LinkedIn, I don't do any type of outreach anymore. Everyone does the outreach for me. And it's just really important that if someone reach out to you or wants to connect with you, make sure you message back and connect, because you never know what employment opportunity that may come from. Because I'll be quite honest with y'all, when you all are navigating your job search, you're most likely going to get a job not because you submitted an application, but because someone reached out to you directly. And that's how I mentioned how I found out about my current position wasn't actually because I saw it on a website. It was because someone from LinkedIn reached out to me and encouraged me to apply, and they thought I would make an excellent, or I'd be excellent in the role, and now I'm here.
And I think one of the things I've brought up in previous webinars is I feel like higher education has this stigma that you have to have sort of a professional established relationship with somebody already to connect on LinkedIn. And no other industry thinks of LinkedIn in that way, right? Like, it's not about their besties at work. It's about
Mhm.
who they want to follow, what articles they want to read, how they want to curate the content related to their subject matter. And I think we have to shift our mindset as higher education, that it's not like the way that Facebook was decades ago of like, it's your inner circle. It's meant to be broad by nature.
Completely agree to that.
Well, thank you, Annalicia. I'm so appreciative of your time. How can folks reach out to you? Obviously, you have your LinkedIn profile. Is that the best way for folks to reach out to you post session?
Yes, I would definitely say if you are interested in connecting, reach out to me via LinkedIn. Let me go ahead and have my LinkedIn profile linked in the comments just in case. You can also search me on LinkedIn. you can also search me up online, Annalicia Garcia, and I'm sure a ton of different things will pop up. But you can always send me a message on LinkedIn, or like I mentioned, I have that hyperlink, Let's Connect, and you can always send me an email that way, or fill out a Google form if needed. But if you ever have any questions or ever just need like a little quick chat, like I'm more than happy to do that.
Awesome. And we will make sure that Annalicia's LinkedIn is linked in the email that will go out, letting you know that the recording is available, as well as sharing some of the websites that she's highlighted as resources for you to use. So make sure to take a look at that. Thank you again. This is the last session in our October series. Like I mentioned, we hope to continue some of these conversations beyond October, given the demand. But I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to talk with folks today.
Yeah, no, of course. And thank you all so much for being a part of this community. And hopefully, together, we can all support and connect and help one another to move forward. Take care,
Awesome.
everyone.
Have a great night.